Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone out today. We're very glad to have you. I have the unenviable task of preaching after Craig Calton. So I do appreciate the prayers that you said on my behalf. I hope they are warranted and that they will do me good. So, as we were thinking of the lesson today, I was thinking of something that would be applicable not only to us, but also something to put in the minds of our young folks as they prepare to start back to school. And so, as I was going through this, I wanted to know how many of you have ever been to the zoo? Anyone here been to the zoo? Anyone like that? Typically, you know, one of the favorites of one of the favorite stops in the zoos is the monkey house. And it's because, as they say, fun is as fun as a barrel full of monkeys. And that's the idea that they're very rambunctious, they're mischievous, they're all over the place. You can't keep them together. For those of you who watch old movies, they're a lot like the Marx Brothers. They're just going off doing all their crazy stuff. But have you ever stopped and thought, how did they get the monkeys there? Monkeys are not very easy to bring. I mean, you can't really hurt them. They are very fast and agile, some of them. And those that aren't fast and agile are big, hulking 2-ton beasts that can crush you easily with your hands. Even the small monkeys that you see in movies where uh, the the really exotic person with the turban is sitting there and there's a little monkey on his shoulder and it's got the long tail, they have fangs and they have claws. And it is not unheard of pet monkeys seriously maiming and harming their owners. And so when you think about this, how does one catch them? Well, the easiest thing for us would be go out there with a dart gun and put one down, tranquilize. But most of the monkey catching industry takes place in more primitive countries and are relied on primitive labor to do that. And so cultures in India and Southeast Asia, some parts of Africa, have a special technique to catch them. And it really relies on understanding the nature of your prey. And that's what we're going to look at today, is about the monkey. So the way that they capture monkeys is they find a gourd or a log or some kind of box that's, you know, secured. It has a hole that is easy enough for a monkey to put its hand in, but they drive two diagonal spikes in, so an open hand can go in. There's typically something bright and shiny that appeals to the monkey. The monkey can reach in and grab it, but when the fist is formed, it is caught by the two sharp pieces of wood, metal, whatever it is. And so it cannot let go. The problem is, though, the monkey refuses to let go. And all it has to do is open its hand, pull out, and it can run, but it will never do it because it is so attracted to the shiny thing that it is just not going to let go of it. And so it will hold on. And as the hunters come in, it still will not let go. And it does not end well for the monkey. They are either trapped forever or they are a food product, one of the two. So it is a shame because, like I said, the monkey could possibly be fast enough to escape these people. It might could be, strong enough or mean enough to put a whooping on some folks. But it can't do anything because it is stuck. And all it had to do was just let go. Letting go or not letting go is a really popular theme in a lot of movies. And it usually ends badly for the people who refuse to let go. We got a lot of examples for that. If you have watched the Lord of the Ring trilogies. You know, at the very end, the character named Gollum goes to his death because he cannot let go of the ring. It is something his precious. He does not want to let go of it. He dies. If you've ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it's the third one. Got Sean Connery in it. The character there named Elsa, she could escape as the ground is cracking underneath them, but she sees the Holy Grail, and she has to reach for it. And of course, her grip slips, and she and the Grail fall down into the crevices, and the ground closes back on them. Similarly, with the movie The Mummy, uh, Brandon Fraser one, there's a character named Benny, and he could escape, but he so wants the treasure, he allows himself to get caught in the pyramid as the doors shut. And as he's alone with the treasure, then he looks up, and all the insects start crawling at and come get him. So, not letting go is something that we're taught quite regularly. I think one phrase that I particularly quote that I particularly like comes from a movie that Keith and I both enjoy called Heat. And the statement in that one is don't let yourself get attached to anything you're not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. So, like I said, the brilliance and the deviousness of this particular trap is understanding the nature of prey. And Satan sets traps for us. And he does this a couple of ways. He can either incite us emotionally, or he can entice us physically and mentally. 9 times out of the 10, it is enticement. That is more common for us because we're bombarded with it. We're hit with different ways. The three primary one is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Our lusts are what tempt us. We each have unique weaknesses. Much like this particular phrase here, or this particular graphic we have here, Satan is an expert angler. He's a fisher of men as well. And because he doesn't know exactly what it is that tempts us, he's going to keep dropping different kinds of bait in front of us to see what we'll take. And then when we take it, we are in the trap and we are in trouble. So, what we're going to look at today is how do we escape the trap? Well, the first one seems to be the most obvious, which is not to take the bait. As we look at this, we need to think about, first of all, what is it that we're seeing? We need to make sure that we do not get caught in the moment. Don't be myopic. And that's not myopic in the sense of not thinking far ahead, but well, it is, but it's also not being short sighted. If we look to the unseen and not the seen, we're going to have the right focus. If we're just looking at what's right in front of us, it's easy to lose our head. You know, I'll give you a really bad analogy here, but it's one that works anyway. I mean, some of you know that for a long time I was a prisoner of suspenders. I was, and so no matter how hard you work, you might get to the point where finally you've lost some weight, and then some folks say, "Hey, we're going to the buffet," and so if you're just like focused right on that, then you're liable to sabotage yourself. If you keep in mind the end state of 1995 jeans, then you will you're less likely to lose your focus. So we need to be looking far and not near. We need to be looking at the unseen, not caught up in the seen. Basically, is our focus on earth or is our focus on heaven? The next thing is, and I'm sorry, I got my bullet, or we'll go down to the bottom bullet here, is we need to recognize the bait for what it is and to be disgusted by it. I'm going to steal from Craig's lesson his class last week, where he was talking about recognizing sin. And he had one of the best short mime examples I think I've seen in a while. Sin. Ooh, sin. No, no, no. And that's how we are. We can be attracted by something. Thoughts will always go into our head. We will be triggered. We'll have some kind of emotion, but we need to be able to recognize what it is and stop and get out of there. You need to abhor evil, and that is be disgusted by it. If you're disgusted by it, you won't want it. Another thing is you need to trust your training and stick to your guns. We have the Bible from the very beginning. It's filled with stories of people who knew what was right, but somebody else managed to talk to them and change their mind. Adam and Eve, don't eat of the fruit. The serpent said, "Oh, no, no, you won't die. You're okay." Balaam, God told him to go and to curse the country. And he was told by the king, "Oh, no, no, no. It's okay. We'll give you more money." And of course, a previous lesson we had, the young and the old prophet when the kingdom was first divided. And the young prophet went and was told, "Go straight, do your duty, come straight back." And he was intercepted by an old prophet who said, "No, no, no. I talked to God. It's okay. You come back with us." And in all those cases, they were doomed because they listened to the empty words of others. And then finally, if we are filled with the fruit of the Spirit, we're not going to be wanting something else. An old rule of thumb is you need to eat before you go grocery shopping. And if you do that, is because if you're full, you're less likely to give into urges. Sorry about that. And so, if we are filled with the good things of God and we are filled with that, there's not going to be room for the other stuff. We talk about, I've used this example a lot of times, but 2 Peter 2:22, when we look at the dog and the pig, when we're talking about sin, the dog returns to his own vomit and the pig returns to the mire. And one, it is about disgusting things. Um, but it really is this with the dog, if you think about it, the dog, when it is vomited, suddenly it is empty. It needs to be filled. What's right here in front of me? It's good the first time. So empty and filled. And then with the pig in the mire, for the most part, unless they've gone feral and have or grown grown their hair back, like razorback pigs, uh, a pig has very soft, sensitive skin, and the sun hurts it. So it needs to be soothed. So it gets into the mire and gets all nasty and muddy because it wants to be comforted. Fill me, comfort me. That's what a lot of sin really comes back to. So if we are filled with the fruit of the Spirit, we're not going, hopefully, not going to want to take the bait as easily as if we are running on empty. The next step in avoiding the trap is watching where you're going. I know we have a few science fiction folks in here. I know Jordan is not here, so he'll miss this. But we'll get anyway. Frank Herbert, who wrote the book Dune, which was a book, not a movie. originally, wrote the book Dune, said knowing where the trap is, that's the first step in evading it. So if we know where temptation is and we could avoid it, we should do so. And this involves a lot about how you walk and where you go. So we look at in Ephesians where they talk about working circumspectly. Circumspectly is a term that basically circle, if you look at that. Circumspectly means to be cautious and prudent, to have discretion, and to consider circumstances and consequences in advance. To walk circumspectly means that you aren't just going straight in. You are kind of making sure you're looking around at all times, watching where you are going. And we need to be doing that on a regular basis because we can get distracted and blunder into things. If you know where the sin is, you can stay away from it. Next thing is staying on the right path. And notice it said the right path because there are paths to sin as well, but the right path and staying on that. If you think about remember all the various fairy tales that you have heard through the years. How many of those have the story where the person is told, "Do not deviate off the path. Stay on the path to whatever." And of course, they do get off, and then they have to deal with all kinds of terrifying things, from wolves to witches to whatever it may be. Paths, if we think about them, typically they're cleared. They have been cleared in advance for us, or work has been done to where we have a clean path to a certain direction. And paths typically have a known instinct. So if we stray from the path, it is easier while we're out in the weeds and the brush and not able to see what is on the ground to step into the trap. And the same thing here. If we stay on the path that God has set for us, and when I say that, I do not mean predestination. God does not predestine. We all have choice. But the path and the plan that He put into place and prepared for us, so that those who believe, if they follow it and obey, can get to heaven. If we stay on that, we are good. Another good thing is, it's a lot easier to see a trap in the daylight than it is at night. And if we walk in the light and walk in the truth, we can avoid the darkness. And finally, we need to enter by the narrow gate. You know, follow directions and don't take the wrong exit because we don't want to get caught in that traffic jam of sin. Next, don't push your luck. We all have the tendency to want to do that. We want to push the envelope. We want to see how far we can get it. Some people do. And so we don't want to see how close you can get to the edge because if you're not careful, you will fall into it. When Satan was tempting Jesus, Jesus quoted Deuteronomy and he said, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." And we don't want to test God. We don't want to tempt God by seeing how close we can get. He might just let us, you know, take that one step too far. So we don't want to tempt God. We also don't want to we don't want to put things in place so it is easy for us to sin. And of course, with that comes the people that you associate it with. If I had one one piece of advice to give to our young folks who are going to be going back to school, I would say pay close attention to 1 Corinthians 15:33. It is very true. Bad company corrupts good morals. And you may not initially think you're going to do something, but Sometimes people rub off on you. You may suddenly start thinking in curse words, but normally you might not have. You may start doing, you may be tempted to, just because the people around you are just swearing nonstop. You may slowly be worn down and be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that could happen. I told this story a long time ago, but sometimes if you, this is probably better for the previous slide, but it ties into bad company. If you're at a place that has bad company in it and you know that you shouldn't be there, sometimes you might get in trouble even though you had no intention of doing anything wrong. In case, several years ago when I lived in Nashville, I decided I wanted to go see a music act. And it was at kind of a moderately rough little joint. And I was up against the stage, and two very large individuals got into a fight right behind me. And this was not seating, we were standing. So, guess who almost got pulled into that? And if I had not been there, I would not have run the risk of having to go into work the next day and explain to everyone that the lawnmower that spit me out had a beehive, a, a poodle skirt, and a technically proficient left hook. If you're not somewhere where you shouldn't be, you're not going to run the risk of being in trouble. And if you're not around people who act like they need to be wearing a flea collar, then you have less chance of fleas getting off on you. I am very sad to say this, that I had a friend that did a lot of favors for me. We were very close, but he simply just over the years, this has just devolved and devolved, and so I finally had to sever and move on because it was just not a good example. Last thing is, don't be cocky. There are a lot of people that are very, very strong spiritually, but we need to make sure that we take heed lest we fall. Don't underestimate the power of the devil, because he will find a way to get you if you think that you are too strong to fall and that you can just do it on your own. There's a Greek myth uh, involving the three golden apples, and there was a young huntress named Atalanta who was very fast, and she made the claim, "I will not marry any man who cannot beat me in a race." And so many men tried to race her. She beat all of them. And when they lost, they were killed. There was a man named Hippomenes who so desperately was in love with her. And so he was granted, in Greek mythology, three golden apples by Aphrodite. And so as he ran, even though she was a superior runner, he would throw a golden apple. "Oh, this is so pretty. I'm fast enough to catch him." And so she'd stop and pick up an apple. And she'd gain on him again. He'd throw the other apple. She ran over to get it. And then he did so with the third. And it was just enough for him to finish right before her. And even though she knew and was confident in her skill and had proved it many, many times, she lost the race and she got shackled. Well, maybe she didn't get shackled, but he was able to gain a wife. And so we as Christians, we need to be careful. Don't be overconfident in your spiritual strength. And don't be cocky enough to where you think, "I can be here, I can go do this, I can watch this, I can listen to this. It will not affect me." Things rub off. Sometimes we just need to call for help. And some sins are a lot of stronger than others, and they're more like a web holding us as opposed to us holding the sin. And we're going to need help escaping. And it's okay to ask for help. You shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help. And those of us, the brethren, we have a responsibility to help that individual. We should, while we should admonish the person, we should admonish and encourage. They should never feel like they are too ashamed to talk about whatever it is, and that they're going to just get the stink eye or be stigmatized. If you're truly needing help with something, we should we should uh, be ready to help our brethren. And so, if you need help, first of all, go to the Word. The Word is strong enough. God has, Paul told Timothy that the Word was good for for teaching, good for learning, good for reproving. First of all, go to the Word for help to get out, and then go to your church brethren. Talk to your brethren, confess your sins if you need to. And when you find someone, you should find someone who can really help you. Uh, the great example that our brother Gary used to always have is if you are having marital problems, don't go to somebody who's had a divorce or two or three divorces and ask them for advice. Find someone with a strong marriage, someone who's made through, and then talk to them. Uh, we need to continuously encourage this person as long as it is called today, and then, of course, help restore them from the sin. As tough as the sin may be and as entangled as we are in it, God will provide an escape for us, and He has promised us that. So we need to take Him up on that. And finally, sometimes you just have to sever and escape. Foxes, coyotes, and wolves will chew off their leg to keep from being caught in a trap. And if they are that, and if we think of the contrast to that, they're willing to chew off their own leg, whereas a monkey is dumb enough to keep holding on to something right there that he could just let go of. Jesus said that it is better to be maimed and go into heaven maimed than it is to be fully whole and go to hell. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. If your hand offends you, cut it off. Now, I trust that everybody in the room understands that it's metaphorical for something that is holding us back. We're not saying, we're not promoting any kind of, you know, what's the word I want to use here for this? We're not promoting anyone to hurt themselves here. Go out and do that. There have been people who've done it. But there are things in our lives that are very dear to us that we hold very strongly. And sometimes we need to cut and run. If we know if something or someone is causing us to sin, we need to give it up or them up. And that's really what being a Christian is about. And it's counting the cost. The idea of presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice is exactly that. It is sacrifice. It is really choice, commitment, and sacrifice. We have to choose what is the priority because we can't have two masters. We are the slaves to the one that we obey. We need to be all in on this. And that means dying to sin, not letting it rule over us, and crucifying the flesh and the passions. Crucifixion was a horrible death. Getting rid of sin is not going to be easy. It will be painful to some degree, the withdrawal of it, but we have to decide which is worth more, this or eternal life. And then the tough choices of sacrifice. because we're going to have to sacrifice possessions. We're going to have to sacrifice urges and desires. We're going to have to sacrifice cool points and friends, especially in school. But it's not just in school, it's going to happen in the workplace too. And then finally, the toughest one of all, we're going to be faced with instances where we've got family who do not understand. And they're not going to take it very well. And so if we have to choose between making family happy or obeying God, we should obey God. So we need to ask ourselves, what is your treasure? I would say that if we're looking at treasure, we need to invest wisely now, or the penalties will be great. If you think of it, the stubbornness we have, we're gaining interest on a Wrath account, which is a lot different than a Roth account. This one gains a lot of interest, and we don't want the payback that's coming for it. I advise that we invest wisely, like Abraham and Moses. Abraham gave up his land for something he had never seen before, but he trusted it. And Moses decided that obeying God was worth more than the pleasing pleasures of sin for, as the Bible says, a season. And if you think about that, he was a prince in the royal house of Egypt. So he would have stayed that way until he died. And yet God still refers to it as a season. And it is a passing season. You know, we really need to be asking ourselves, what is our soul worth? Is it like Esau and Achan, where we give it up for a bowl of soup or a bar of gold, a robe, 200 shekels? Are we selling our soul, eternal soul, for the satisfaction of knowing that we were right and put that person in their place? Is your soul worth a tingle? Is your soul worth $20 that you took from somebody else? Is your soul not worth not keeping your word? And we need to keep that in mind. When we sin, we should be asking ourselves, we need to remind ourselves, if I'm sinning, we should be asking Judas's question. Because every time you sin, we're saying, what will you give me to betray him? You know, I had said earlier, go back one, Matthew 16:26 asks, what will man profit if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Which leads to this slide. You know, we've all asked ourselves this question. We've had moments where we've looked back and we've asked, what was I thinking? Sometimes it's about an ex or a crush that you once dated or wanted to date. And now you're thinking, what was I thinking? Sometimes it's fashion and haircuts, parachute pats and mullets. They're not as fashionable as they were. And sometimes it's dumb stunts, i.e., hey, buddy, watch this. And poor decisions in general. We all do things that later we think, man, I really was stupid. What was I thinking doing that? And the reason why we do that is because we mature and change with time. And that comes with distance and perspective when your tastes and priorities change. But sin will be the same. There is a short, I want to go back to science fiction one more time. There is a sci-fi short story. I think it may have been written by Isaac Asimov, oddly enough. But basically, it is about Judgment Day. And the story, the basic premise is all these people were together, and suddenly the Suddenly the veil is lifted and there is no more lust. And they suddenly realize, what have I done? And the horror of realizing what they've done. When we pass to the other side and we come before the Lord, lust is going to pass away. And there's going to be clarity and severe regret. Even those who are obedient to the Lord, when things are made more clear, we're going to be even more disgusted with ourselves for what we did. We're going to be horrified at the decisions we make. People are going to reap what they've sown, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. You know, don't delay in letting go, because the longer you're holding on, the harder it's going to be to escape. There is a term called centrifugal force, and it happens primarily with pilots, but in many cases in World War II and then later in Vietnam, some places, there were pilots who waited just a little too late to try to eject from their plane. And unfortunately, the centrifugal force pinned them in, and it was too late. They could not get out of their seat because they waited too long and they died. We need to come to our senses and be ready sooner than later, and we must lay aside the sin that charms and encumbers us, as tomorrow is not promised to any one of us. There is going to come a day when it's going to be too late, and it will not end, much like the monkey, it will not end for those who did not let go. God's going to destroy ungodly men. He is impartial. And if we as Christians continue to sin after we receive the truth, we are going to get the exact same punishment. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And I will end that with one more science fiction movie quote. If any of you have seen the movie Event Horizon, there's a phrase in there, there's a quote in there that's very relevant. And one of the characters says, "You know nothing. Hell is only a word. The reality is much, much worse." We do not want to find out. There is one thing that we do need to hold on to, and that is our Lord Jesus. We should not let go of Jesus at any cost. We will be tempted, we will be challenged, and no matter how difficult or painful it is, we need to hold on. We need to sell all for the pearl of great price. He will provide the eternal gift of life that will break the chains and the bondage of sin. The reward will be greater than anything that we have had to suffer in this life. So I say to you, what are you waiting for? If you have not been saved, talk to someone here afterwards, and we can tell you the various steps. It's pretty simple. Hear, believe, repent, confess. Be baptized, be faithful unto death, and teach others to do the same. If you are someone who has been baptized and been a member, and you have backslidden, come back, take God's hand and repent, and ask for prayers and help. And with that, we'll